Yeah.
Yo, what's good? Guten Morgen. Morgen, morgen. Yeah, so, I mean, not much to say really. We're going to continue on with this one today. This is kind of where we got up to yesterday. I threw some really quick sort of grading notes over it, which I'm going to address later, but basically pulling all the values much closer together nearer the end. I also made some notes on like some other things that I want to add. I want there to be a bit more evidence of like shipwrecks and stuff around, so there's going to be a bit more sort of, you know, ribs from boats and that kind of a thing scattered around. A bit more like rigging, maybe an old sail, that kind of stuff. And then maybe a crow, concept birds. So yeah, that along with the grading is kind of maybe what it's going to look like later. So for now, yeah, I'm going to work inside of some shapes that I already created. And yeah, I'm going to add other stuff like these other things that I mentioned. And then later we will tackle the sky because, yeah, the clouds and stuff still need work. Well, it all needs work. It's very early on. It's still very much at like a color sketch kind of stage. So yeah, I'm just gonna jump into it. I've got my references, so I'm gonna take a look at those for this boat right now. And I'm just gonna make a start there. Gonna treat it almost a bit like a study, and as much as it's gonna be how I'm gonna warm up into the illustration today is by doing the boat. So yeah, I'm gonna jump in. And the boat in this one is meant to be of a kind of a bit larger scale than this, so there's also things that I need to address there about the scale of it and that perception. But again, it's just fairly easy stuff to address at this point. But yeah, everyone's back at work now. The New Year holiday buzz is all gone. The 2026 grind is in full swing. Just figuring out the right brush here to indicate the texture on the back of the boat. This one seems to do a nice job. I honestly use this brush all the time. It's a very nice texture brush. It's got a lot of uses, you know. And this on this version, it's kind of like an amalgamation of the two references, so we kind of see a little bit inside the boat here. Gives it a bit of depth and cutaway, like I do like that about this one, that you see sort of through it a little bit. Indicates that space quite nicely. Obviously it needs to be a little bit darker. And still very much getting used to like figuring out how to kind of push a landscape painting more, because any landscapes I do for work, they're usually just part of a background that is quite far away, kind of a lot of the time like out of focus. So sort of detailing them up to a point where it's like, oh, this is predominantly just a landscape piece, you know, is territory that is a little unfamiliar, I guess. It's hard to know when enough is enough. Can be easy to overdo, you know. I think obviously suggestion is king, at least in my sort of sensibilities for finishing things. So if I can suggest the detail and not sort of fully commit to painting in details rather, sorry, and more just think like what is it meant to be, and like and I'm seeing it from a distance, so like what way can I suggest that this detail exists without obviously just going in and fully painting it. Much more of a sort of an impressionistic way of finishing something up, which is easier said than done a lot of the time. But I think staying zoomed out as much as possible really helps. And having some reference so you actually know like what you're trying to simplify. I think that's also a big one. But yeah, still not super good at it. Yo, Sumi.io, thank you for the follow. Welcome to the stream. Thanks for tuning in. If you got any questions about kind of what I'm doing or anything like that, please feel free. I'm happy to answer. You're not disturbing in any way. Yeah, did want to add some like barnacles and stuff to this as well. Important. How do you know you're at the beach otherwise? You know? I see. Something else I've been learning with the environments is when you're suggesting textures, sometimes just like a scribble with a texture brush can indicate more than a detail. Like it's really just enough visual noise that your brain, your eye is picking up on it and being like, oh, okay, I know if that's wood, then this is probably, you know, like rotten, and there's grain to it and so on, without really even painting that detail too much, just suggesting it. Your brain does a lot of the work for you. Managed to completely jump to a different layer there. Well done. Okay, so let's go to the floor. Work inside of that layer. Basically just going to sort of jump into the various shapes. If you were here yesterday, you'll know what I mean, but I can go over that briefly. Like each of, basically, let me turn them all off, then turn them all back on again. The image is split out into separate layers, with each main object, let's say, is separated. So background, sky, clouds, etc. And they're all just painted shapes. And because they're separated, I can still manipulate them quite a bit. So these are like waves crashing up behind that main rock. Here's that focal point rock with the ship on it. These are waves that are splashing kind of over the rock, but in front of it. This was some mist, but we kept that off for now. This is the sails for the boat. The rocks on the right. Background rocks. The floor plane itself. The mid-ground rocks. There's some like rigging and a bit of a shipwreck on that. This is just to sort of knock some values back, but we turn that off for now. This is the water that kind of surrounds the foreground, going all the way into the midground and eventually the background. Then here is some rocks that exist on the floor plane as well. Some more floor rocks. The sort of wave splashes against those. That's just my horizon line. Some more mist, and then the boat. So that's the boat, and then the sort of top deck area, and then the sort of the ribs that go over the front of that. And so when I'm saying paint inside of shapes, I'm literally going, to this, and I'm painting inside the shape that I created, and that way I can be kind of quite free with the brush strokes and not worry about painting over other things in the image, and it keeps a nice kind of edge, crisp edge to the background as well. But what this enables me to do is, if at any point that I let's say want to rearrange stuff in the image, like maybe I want to have this boat, change the shape of it, I can do that independently of everything else in the image, and so I have a lot of freedom to edit and change things. Like as I was turning those layers on there, I was thinking actually that rigging could be a little bit bigger so it can stand out a bit more. It's something that I was looking at after stream yesterday with the image, was just like actually how I want a little bit more sort of obviousness to the way that the sort of shipwrecked silhouettes and stuff stand out in the image, and add a little bit more of that, because after all, I didn't want it to just be sort of this one ship on the big rock. Like I wanted the impression that there's actually a whole load of shipwrecks here, and that it's actually a whole place where wrecks happen. They need a lighthouse. They're down bad. really down bad. Right, let's put these in a folder. Illucam, welcome. Welcome. Thanks for the follow. I'll just call that foreground boat. And I've just put those layers in a folder here so I can kind of attach some stuff in. And I'm just using a lighten layer to really crush those values together a little bit as the boat goes into the image. If you imagine, a beach like this, kind of stormy beach, there's a lot of humidity in the air. Mean Machine Rex, thank you for the follow. Composition is sick. Thanks, Illucam. Much appreciated. Yeah, we spent some time designing this composition yesterday. I actually drew it in my sketchbook on the weekend. Like really rough scribbles. And then, went looking for some references in terms of like how everything should look. And then we built out this composition yesterday, but basically this boat functions as two things. It functions as kind of a more clear representation of a boat wreck, so that when we see things like this or later on these other kind of boat wreck stuff that I want to put in here, that because we have a sort of a clear view on one of them, the shapes and the language of that is something that we'll then sort of extrapolate further. Our brains are kind of good at picking up on the same kind of details, and therefore being like, oh, okay, that's a similar thing, without me actually having to go in and paint this. And the other thing is, compositionally, then this gives us a nice kind of lead-in, like it's helping to focus our attention and push the eye into this. Likewise, like these rocks and these rocks on the floor, stuff like this, they all start to kind of point in this way. We have this nice contrast of the wave coming up as well, which kind of forces us up here. Similarly, the clouds are doing the same thing. They're kind of highlighting this area. And then we have the contrast of like lighter sky, darker clouds, darker focal point, and we sort of lose contrast in a lot of other places, so that this remains really quite a sort of pull for the eye. And if we're thinking of it like a sort of a video game level, and we're entering this space, and we're like here, this is like we're going to journey this way, and this is probably where we're going to fight the final boss or something. It's also the other thing that I had in mind here was to take a well-known motif, so that sort of like landscape with a hill and a castle on it, and this would be a landscape with a river and all of that, to take that sort of well-known motif, and this it's got flags on it and all that, take that sort of thing, but then use it in this sort of shipwreck scenario. So it's kind of visually something that we know as a bit of a trope, but kind of then twisted to become the shipwreck rather than a castle on the hill, and therefore it just has a bit of fantasy about it. So that's the rundown for that. And at this point it's about just adding a little bit more of the storytelling and the details within the shapes. So I'm going to add a few more sort of wrecks or similar kind of boat shapes, maybe even some more rocks, a little bit of elevation changes and stuff like that. in here, but I was going to work on the floor just before, so I will do that now. I do have a brush that I think works quite nicely for for indicating a bit of sandy kind of texture. In some of these areas. But I also want to sort of create some edges and so on, give the impression of like puddles, kind of rock pools, that kind of a thing. Just the impression of it though, like I'm not ultimately trying to make this super detailed. The whole thing is about the impression. And I would like to be sort of a little cleaner, I guess, with the way that I make this impression. I feel like sometimes at this point in the image, it can get a little bit too noisy and not in a way that I kind of particularly desire. Like I said, landscapes is still something I'm learning to get better at. Much more of a character artist, if I had to sort of highlight the thing I'm more adept at, let's say, is painting characters. So yeah, but that's why we learn. Zooming in a bit too much. I'm going to stop there. You know, they say comparison is the thief of joy. Well, zooming in is the thief of impression. So I'm sort of painting into the water that exists in these puddles, right? But it's like rough enough that it's not going to be a glass reflection of the mountains behind, but I still want a little bit of that value creeping in. But what's really making it, I guess, is taking like a lighter brush, and where the sort of sand meets the water is like you would go in and indicate like a little bit of an edge where the water's been like disturbed a little bit and sort of gives this nice impression. You just got to do it sparingly and watch your brush sizes. Hey Alex, I won't be able to stay, but I wanted to say hi, hope you're doing well. Nice to see you back on stream when you have the time. This piece looks already very cool. Love the composition and mood. Yo, Eternal, thanks very much, mate. And good to hear from you. Hope you're doing well. And yeah, have a great day. I appreciate you tuning in. Even if it's just for a minute. Okay. Gonna paint inside some of the rocks. Where are we? Floor rocks. Floor rocks 2, floor rocks. There we go. Boom. I got to be careful here as I kind of indicate some of these rocks that I don't end up doing like the same size brush strokes and stuff every time. It can kind of destroy the impression a little bit. You can see here that like they're all sort of going the same way and there's similar sizes right now, so just pay a bit of attention to that. If they all become too uniform, then it won't look right. It'll look a bit unnatural. So just being careful to do that. It's something we sort of naturally do, is kind of make similar size and shape strokes and patterns and stuff. You can't help it really. If you aren't fully concentrating, you'll do it. And it can undo the impression of something quite quickly if you fall prey to it. So it's always something I have to like look at and be like, oh yeah, okay, change this aspect of it because it's looking the same. Triangle shape is such a nice hack. You can never go wrong using it. Yeah, that's true. That's true. There's going to be sort of more things as well in the illustration eventually that help support the focal point as being the focal point. A little bit of like saturation won't go amiss, and some smaller detail. A bit more contrast, but I just got to be careful how that's done. And I will eventually like grade the image so that it is actually much more darker overall. Hang on, I'll turn them on. My sort of grading later is really going to sort of crush the values even more together so that it has that real like very, very stormy feel about it. All the values are very close together, and it's like very humid in the air, so there's just, it really is going to push us over here, and all of the edges around here are just going to sort of melt together a bit, but at the moment it's just a little bit brighter because it's all separated, and you don't want to paint with those layers on. It gets really annoying to do that, so I just have them in there ready to go for later. Ready to crunch down those details. I'm just taking this like slightly lighter value, and I'm kind of going to try indicate a little bit that there's a kind of wetness to the top of some of these rocks, and so they're planes that are facing upwards. Going to get a little bit more of that sky reflection. Well, the reflection of the sky in the water that's on the top of the rock, you know. So you just include a little bit of that sky color in there. I don't know if we can get away with some of this green on the kind of seaweedy bit. It ultimately might be too much, but we'll see. Don't zoom in. Don't zoom in. Are you still involved at Lara at all? Unfortunately, Lara has closed down. It closed down like during COVID. Obviously, wasn't able to remain open when no one was allowed to be there. So yeah, it's no more, which is a real shame. Otherwise, yeah, I'd still probably try and be involved into some capacity. Ilukam, do I know you? IRL? Yes. Okay. Do I have to guess who you are? I can only assume their name is Cat. Okay. I did think so. I did think so. How you doing, mate? How's Murphy? And the frogs? How are your frogs? Hi Alex, great painting. I like the composition and energy in it. Thank you, Bright Design. Thanks very much. I appreciate that. And welcome to the stream. Thanks for saying hi. Good to hear your dulcet tones again. Murphy is doing great. We bought a house in Perthshire this year with a big garden for him to live his best life in. That's great. Murphy is a very sweet dog. I like him a lot. Frogs were left in care of a friend when we went holiday once and came back to them crispy and no longer croaking. Oh no. That's some bad friends. That's devastating. Sorry to hear that. And yeah, you need better friends. Ex-friend. Yeah, exactly. Damn, that's really sad. Again, they're very sweet. Sweet little froggies. Yo, Castonia. She's here. Thank you. Yeah, I too am finding a real enjoyment in the landscape stuff right now. It's nice to have the time to really put in some dedicated practice and really try and figure out the what's needed in it to make an environment work. Like it is a different beast to characters, a bit more of a consideration for certain things. But I'm really enjoying the journey and trying to learn it, figure it out. It's a bit frustrating at times. Like I said, I think there is a point where it's hard to keep the sort of freshness and the impression of the sort of early stages when you come to bring in a little bit of detail and light. And with each one I'm doing, I'm finding out like, oh, okay, this didn't work and this did work, and so on, and just trying to carry over the learnings from one study to the next. And I thought I've done quite a few studies recently of photos of landscapes and found a nice kind of way of starting them. And I just wanted to try doing a piece where I'm inventing the composition and the overall mood, and just using reference every now and again to sort of fill in the gaps, but much more trying to invent it this time than using the sort of cues from the ref. And yeah, hoping to do a few more of these, and just overall improve them, get better at them. It's really nice to paint them. It's kind of quite relaxing in a way. It's sort of like plein air painting, which is a really nice thing to do. And just landscapes can be so cool and like awe-inspiring, and the mood somewhere can really be quite engaging. It's quite nice to sort of think back, like when I've been surfing and stuff and been on like really, really stormy, overcast beaches like this, and like, what does it feel like? What are like the colors? Just getting into the mood of it. It's really nice. Like, we've been surfing in Portugal before, and it's been quite sort of rough waters, big waves, kind of overcast like this, and you're going out into the water in your wetsuit, and it's kind of cold, but it's sort of nice at the same time. and you just get absolutely battered by the waves, and it's like how to translate that feeling into the landscape painting itself, and like just trying to remember how things look, how things kind of generally feel, and so on. So it's interesting, to say the least. And I've just done characters for so long that it's a nice change of pace to paint something that has personality, but in a and it's nothing to do with like the pose of a character or something. It's much more sort of color and impression and stuff like that. I know it's a little less obvious, I think. I guess is the, like in a character, you're like, oh, I can make them feel a certain way because of this pose and this lighting, and it's obvious because it's a person and they have a facial expression, they're doing something. It's not so easy to do that in an environment, I think. And you have to find other ways of doing it, and it's just kind of interesting in a different way. Don't know if I explained that very well, but that's where I'm at. Bye. Are you using much ref for this, or is it all from the dome? Yeah, so I do have some references. I'll show you them quickly. So like this one is more here for sort of color palette and overall tone, you know, like the closeness of the values and the subtle hue shifts. Similarly, this one is here for that same reason. You know, I like the sort of slight greens, the overall sort of haze that there is to these. They're quite cinematic. I got these references. They're Sketchfab 3D scans of like real shipwrecks, I think. So these were kind of my references for basically drawing this out, which is an amalgamation of essentially parts of this that I liked and parts of this that I liked. So that's all just painted out, but using these as the ref for that. Again, this is just here for sort of the mood, like, you know, the floor, for example, being inspiration for the floor here with the sort of the puddles and so on. There's a bit more sort of debris in this, which is actually kind of nice. So that's something I might introduce into the floor here now, looking back at this. This is a fairly like obvious reference, Stormy Beach kind of scene. Similarly here, this is here because I like the sort of the lost edges that give it that kind of humidity feeling about it. So there's a lot of that going on that I want to introduce into mine. Real rocks and rock pools to look at. Again, just nice mood, nice kind of graphic shapes in the landscape, and I like the depth here, right? The sort of the haze where you get only the lit portions of what we're looking at are available to see, and like that's something that's going to happen a little bit here. Yeah, this just again kind of obvious. So those are the references, and I look at them mostly off stream, and then when I come on stream, I'm just trying to recall things, and then that's helping me kind of stay in the invention mode rather than copy mode, you know. Because obviously reference is great, it can help you solve problems, but it can also be a bit of a crutch, right? You lean on it a bit too much, and then the design of your illustration gets a bit lost, and you just you end up like copying references, and you lose a little bit of like the uniqueness that you could bring to the piece by stylizing shapes and that kind of thing. So it's I think it's kind of nice to just look at it before stream and be like, okay, I like this, blah, blah, blah. And then when I'm painting, I can just focus on like making cool shapes that I like, with an idea of an impression that I'm trying to make. You know, like these rock shapes, you know, if I was just copying the ref, I wouldn't do these sort of more graphic kind of pointed shapes that sort of pull the eye into the illustration a bit. I would just be copying rocks, you know, and I would lose a little bit of what makes this slightly stylized and a bit more interesting in my eyes. So just trying not to like rob myself of the ability to put my own stamp on the design and like graphic nature of it, because I think, like in character work, especially splash artwork, so much can be communicated through the graphic design of the piece, that you know, the sort of the energy and movement and stuff like that, and the composition as a whole can read really well with some care and thought going into actually the graphic design of the shapes and how the composition's arranged. And you can rob yourself of that in copying reference too much. That's not to say that nature doesn't have a design, but it's more to say that an illustration is purely a design. And so if you just copy various bits of nature from various photos and jam it all together, it's not necessarily going to feel, it's not necessarily going to drive the eye around the image in the way that you desire. You have to, you're in control of everything in the illustration, so you got to think through the design if you want it to be readable. Is kind of what I'm saying. That's why you don't put them on PureRef, so you don't look at them too much. Yeah, I've never used PureRef. Like I'm kind of, I guess, a bit more old school in like, I just have Photoshop and I like to have my references directly in the file. I don't even put them on a second screen. You know, if let's say I'm working from a reference like this boat, I just put it right next to what I'm painting and I look at them here on my screen, and just be a bit more direct, and I can just, you know, turn them on and off like that. It's not that I think PureRef's bad or anything like that. I never used it. I never jumped onto it, and I have a workflow that really doesn't benefit that much from having a separate program open to do that. And I just like my references to be next to what I'm looking at straight away. So yeah, I don't feel like I'm missing out on anything there. Do you go as far as at the planning stage to think about where this is? What would that influence how the geology looks, etc.? Is it more about the feel? It's much more about the feel at this stage. I think right now, if I think about landscape painting, let's put it this way. I'm very comfortable with characters, and so my mental stack for things I have to hold in my head while I'm painting when I'm doing characters is pretty low. Like I am very comfortable doing it, and so really I can just get involved in solving the specific issues that image I'm working on has, and not really have to hold in my head any sort of concepts and things to check on. Whereas environment painting, my mental stack, my sort of in tray, if you like, on my desk is full. There's so many things that, while it's still quite unfamiliar, I have to hold in my head that I'm unable to take on like more, let's say, more higher concept thinking and tasks. So yeah, right now it is really all based on feel, while I concentrate on the execution a bit more. And once my sort of mental stack for that has been freed up a bit from a bit more experience and stuff, then I could probably think a little bit more about like actual place specifics and like being accurate if I wanted to a certain place and landscape and like what's there and so on. But yeah, it's a bit unfamiliar at the moment. I guess you could liken it to like when you first start playing chess or something. The idea of like learning an opening and recognizing what the other player's really doing and like thinking ahead so many moves, etc., is sort of outside of the remit of you as a beginner. It's just too much to think about. You're kind of more concentrating on like looking around the pieces on the board and being like, okay, this can do this move, this can do this move, this can do this move. Yeah, this move kind of looks good, etc., etc. You can't really focus on the higher concepts because it's just too much of a brain overload. But you play enough games of chess and then you can start to figure these things out a little bit better. So it's just that's just that, I guess. But yeah, it really is kind of a mental stack thing, like your capacity to hold a certain amount of information in your head at any one time. I think it's something like you can hold 5 to 7 pieces of information in your head, or track 5 to 7 pieces of info. They say this for like sport, for example. Let's say you're actually I'll put it in something that I can understand a bit more. Let's say you're playing like League of Legends, right? And in the beginning, like you can really only focus on like last hitting minions, avoiding the enemy attacks in lane, and maybe like focusing on your cooldown timers or whatever. Like there's only 5 to 7 kind of pieces of information that really you can concentrate on and track in your head at any one time. And until certain things are muscle memory, they're going to take up one of those spaces in your mental stack, right? But as you get more familiar and you play more games, a lot of things become muscle memory, moving your character, pressing the buttons, managing cooldowns, managing minions, all of this kind of stuff. And the more you play, obviously, you're then learning these things and freeing up your mental capacity to take on another or a newer, let's say, concept. And this is how you improve overall. Like you're just working through something that is in your mental stack. And once you know it by rote, or it becomes committed to sort of more muscle memory, then you're gonna have the next thing. So I'm still at that stage with these where there are concepts that take up a lot of my thinking, with landscapes that over time will get learnt out, that will get committed to memory. So that's maybe a long-winded way of saying that, but you know what I mean. Maybe you know what I mean. But it's interesting. I listened to there is a League of Legends podcast. I don't even play the game. Like, I used to, ages ago, but I haven't played it for years, and I really don't have any interest in playing it. But I do like to keep up with it a little bit, like, what new champions are there, and just stuff like this. But anyway, there's this podcast, League of Legends podcast, that I listen to, and they sort of approach talking about League of Legends a bit more like sports psychology in general. And they talk about this mental stack in terms of learning League of Legends, and it is really quite interesting to think about the game like that. And not only that, but I've found that a lot of the psychology behind them teaching, because they're coaches, they coach League of Legends. They were professionals, and now they've been coaching for years and years. But they have a really good way of sort of explaining how we learn, and I've found it applicable to learning anything really, but specifically like learning new stuff when it comes to illustration and painting. And I think the concepts that they go over are really quite interesting, and it's a really good listen. They're three guys from Australia, so they got quite good sort of humor together, and three different personalities. Like, one guy is pretty like I guess detail oriented, and he's sort of very much like quite factual in the way that he talks, a little bit nerdy, I guess. They're all kind of nerdy, but one guy is very much focused on the sort of psychology of playing the game, and he's very good at sort of explaining those concepts. And then one guy is just more sort of he's much more it's like he doesn't necessarily have the vocabulary that the other two have for talking about the game. He's much more sort of down to earth and like a bit more relatable as a person. And the three of them are kind of quite a funny mix. But anyway, I'll link the podcast if anyone's like interested. It's a really good listen. They bring out like an episode every Monday, and it's League of Legends based, but they just talk about it in a way that's I find very interesting and applicable to real life and learning other stuff. So if those interests align for you, then you might enjoy this. I'll put the link here. But it's called Broken by Concept. There's all their podcasts there. Yeah, have a listen. Like, I listen to it every week when it comes out. Just put it on while I'm doing like housework or something, chores. Yeah, it's a good laugh, but very interesting when it comes to learning. Because I do like finding new things to learn and like get into. Last year I decided, I'm going to play tournament paintball and get into that. And like, I did find a lot of the times when I got frustrated learning certain things with paintball, that some of the concepts again from them talking in the podcast were things that I could use to get through the frustrations of learning something new, and just realizing like, okay, I'm kind of at this point with this, and so on. So yeah, you might find some use for it too, especially if you used to play League of Legends and you're sort of still kind of semi-interested in what's going on there, because it's not ultimately focused on like super specifics to do with the game, and more sort of the general mindset. it's kind of a way to sort of stay interested in the game, but not even like watch the game or anything. Just sort of think about it. I'm like, oh, okay. So yeah, I'm just painting inside the water here as I was talking. I'm getting like bits where the water is like a bit more thinner, and we see the sand underneath. I'm just trying to get a sense of like the water having flowed past the rocks and then sort of starting to, lower as it recedes, and we see a bit of sand through it. We get the sort of white edges of the water and so on. Just trying to get an impression of this, and again keep the shapes kind of simplified and graphic, and just try and solve things as like a brush stroke, so that when I zoom in it's like we just have what appears to be brush strokes with different textures in, and not over detail it. So there's like an indication of detail in places, but I'm not going in and like painting barnacles. It's like, okay, this maybe gives the impression of seaweed on the rock, or kind of a bit of barnacles on the rock, and the water receding and stuff. So wave splashes, yeah. So these guys need a bit of figuring out now, because they look really like flat. And put a bit of texture in them, and then basically just give them a little bit of form once they got that foaminess on them. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if you guys find this, but I feel like having learnt to draw and paint, it sort of equipped me with some tools to use to learn like any new skill. I'm fairly aware of there being like periods of frustration when learning to paint and draw, that in some cases due to knowledge exceeding my ability, and then later on frustration coming from the inability to understand what I'm doing, and but knowing it's incorrect, and so on. And I feel like I've been able to take those, the things that I've learnt from those experiences, when I then go to learn something new and I hit a wall where I'm really frustrated with it, or I can't see what to do next, or so on, that I can be like, oh, okay, yeah, remember we're probably at one of these stages. We're probably at a place where our ability to tell what is wrong with what we're doing is there, so I'm noticing the mistakes all the time, but I have an inability to fix it right now because I don't have the skill necessary to do it. And just being aware of that happens when you're trying to learn things, it can help alleviate wasted energy on the frustration, and just being like, okay, well, if this is the case, then I need to do some more practice in these particular areas, and I will then get my ability up. Sorry, yoink. There was a delivery here, so I just had to grab that. So, yeah. You spoke a bit earlier about composition and the contrast in the various elements. Do you consider the windmill principle at all when it comes to having focal points read well? I mean, yeah. I guess There's all sorts of things that I would consider when making things read well. The way that I tend to think about it is this. Let me zoom out, save, and get my red pen, teacher's pen. The way I think of it is a bit more like this, and that is, you have a certain currency that you can spend, right? And all of these currencies are different contrasts that are available to you in an image. So you could have value, saturation, detail. I also sometimes lump in kind of shape into these, but basically these are things that you can contrast, right? You can have, for value, dark versus light. For saturation, you've got saturated versus unsaturated. For detail, you have like busy versus empty. And for shape, you could have, say, like curve versus straight, as an example, or like Art Ladybug, thanks for the follow. Curve versus straight, or like spiky versus round, or whatever. Okay, as an example. So if I want to have something be my focal point in an illustration, I will try and spend all of these in that area. And then if I want something to be less detailed in that illustration, or less of a focal point, I will try and eliminate like 1, 2, or even 3 of these from the equation, depending on where it is in the illustration and how much attention it needs. So what I'm basically trying to do, if my focal point only has these 3 going for it, these 3 contrasts going for it, then if I have something else in the illustration that has all 4, it's going to start competing for that spot. So what I'm trying to do is be aware of what contrast currency I'm spending somewhere, and try and not spend the same amount in other places that aren't meant to be as interesting. But you can also like overspend in one of these to really make it work if you're only using a limited amount of them. So in this illustration, for example, there's going to be value contrast, right, for my focal point, which is clear, sky versus this, right? So we got value. We've got detail. So the cloud and the sky around it is going to be relatively empty, right? Here. So, and this is really quite detailed in here. There's a lot going on. Little shapes and this and the other. So we got detail. Then in terms of like shape, like these are very, or let's say edges, even missed that off. Edges, these are hard edges, these are soft edges. So we got that nice contrast there, and I'd sort of lump that in with shape. So we've got that. What we don't really have right now is saturation contrast. Like this is all quite desaturated and this is all quite desaturated. That's fine, but it does mean I'm only spending like 3 of the 4 here. So when it comes to something like this boat, I need to make sure that I'm dropping some of this off, or I need to maybe add saturation in a little bit here to some degree to kind of pull us in. Other things are obviously at play that make us look here, like the shape of the composition itself. But what I would really try and do is limit these others. Limit having all of these in every single place on the illustration. So yeah, that's really the way I think about it. Overall, I think for me it helps me to do that, and it's a nice kind of sort of toolkit I use to figure out if something needs something or if it needs more of something, and so on. And in an illustration like this, for example, part of the mood is that crushing down of all of these concepts. So like a lot of the image has very similar amounts of what do you call it, of these contrasts or lack of contrasts going on. But what we do have here is like an area of really, really low contrast, but then our character is a lot darker than she might well be for this depth in the image. And we also have like details around her in the background, which we don't have elsewhere. Like nowhere else in the image do we have this like little pop of saturation, these like much smaller, more rhythmic details, and kind of like graphic shapes almost. So these things are clustered around her, and her value is slightly darker, and that's just enough to sort of elevate this out as being the focal point. Obviously it being the only person in the image as well really helps that. But as you can see, it's very controlled. The whole thing is very controlled, but they are spending a little bit more of that currency over here, whereas anywhere else doesn't have that little pop of red and this like little pop of value. This lamppost is here, right, and it is quite dark, but that's really all it has going for it in terms of the contrast. Kind of loses its edges down here, and it's only darker to kind of pull it further off the background. And obviously it's not a person, so we're less likely to look at it over a person as well. But sorry, it's replying to a text message. Unprofessional of me. How would you add saturation for something that's so moody and far away? Would it be lightning? I mean, yeah, I could. For me, if I added some lightning in here, I think it sort of adds a bit more. It's a little bit too like bombastic, I think, for the mood of the image, because I do like this like heavy, crushed, like overcast like value range and so on. So for me, like adding a little bit of saturation potentially in the hues of the sails is a way to do it, or maybe I have like a little bit of light that is coming through the clouds that sort of catches this, and I get a little bit of like these kind of greens of the seaweed to pop. The other thing though, I think, is what I'll do is I will crush the values everywhere else and kind of vignette the image a bit more, so that really the value contrast is going to pop this. So if I turn on my grading layers here, you can see how much this sort of crushes the values of the image together. Now this value contrast and the detail contrast is what's carrying the attention here. There's just a lot more happening in terms of the contrast of the wave and the rock, the contrast of the boat and the sky, and all the tiny kind of smaller details that happen here just pull the eye over here a little bit more. It's just got that little extra thing, and that's because I crushed the values and contrast everywhere else, like, and it kind of vignettes it. So yeah, all these things. What also supports this is like is that the arrangement of all of the objects in the illustration are pointing towards this, and so even if this doesn't have everything it needs to pull the eye there, we're actually being led there already, which yeah is gonna pull us in. No cheeky rim light destined for the ship there. No, that's the thing, like when I'm looking at the references that I have that, you know, have this mood, that putting like a juicy rim light in is just gonna make the image feel the wrong tone. It's a bit too fantasy in a way. It's like there is a sort of groundedness to this illustration that, aside from the shipwrecks, it is just a stormy beach. But the shipwrecks like slightly elevate it into something that's like a bit more in the realm of like Uncharted or just video gamey in general, right? But if I put like a juicy ass rim light on this, or like lightning behind it, it then just kind of pushes it. Oh, it's a tipping point. But you know, let's just quickly, as an example, what I could do subtly is, you know, there's like a little bit of overcast sky, right? But we have a little bit of light that creeps through, and it just like highlights certain parts of the ship. Certain planes, let's say, and we could sort of build it out in this manner so that it has a bit more form to it. But yeah, I don't want to do that on this one. I really just want to keep this as like a silhouette, essentially, and then later on with like some light and layers, stuff like that, just crush the values. Yeah, there we go. Just keep it very moody. All about the mood on this one, you know. Mood strong. So if I had to sort of arrange the composition in a way that didn't really point to the focal point, I would have to use other methods to get me to look at that place, and that would probably mean like putting lightning in and stuff like that. But I feel like I spent time designing the shapes of the composition to regardless of having anything else there, we were hopefully going to look there first, or at least know that our eyes were being driven there. And then everything else is just a bonus after that. As in, anything else I do to push us there is a bonus. Art of Victor Balan. When you scroll via art section and see this, holy artist. Hey, thanks, mate. I appreciate that. I appreciate that a lot. Yeah, well, I guess when you scroll down, it's just a lot of anime, half naked kind of chicks. Joaquin Santo Art, thank you. Joaquin Santo Art, thank you for the follow. Much appreciated. Welcome to the stream. Adds to the feeling of something lost and forgotten, having it as it is. Yeah, exactly. Like, Lost Edges here is really going to be the savior. Lost Edges are a king. I do love a Lost Edge. Just letting something melt into the background and like two surfaces melt together. Yeah, there's a lot of that to come in this. Like, once I have kind of painted inside a lot of the shapes and the textures are there, then it's really about pushing the mood a bit more and losing edges and so on. Just getting very painterly on top of the whole thing. But we got a bit of a ways to go yet. Yeah, exactly. And like this mountain and the top of the and the clouds behind, they're going to sort of melt together a little bit, and I'm going to add some kind of more banked sand and stuff that kind of pulls all these things together. But yeah, it's all to come, really. For now, I'm just doing some very like low contrast surfaces here, which will get even more pushed back when I come to grade it a bit later. But it's nice to have something that is ever so slightly going to tell the eye that there are surfaces there, and then later on they're just going to be very, very pushed together value-wise. So you're just going to get the hint of an impression of that kind of rock surface detail in there, but really nothing solid. It's hard to be subtle. I generally have to sort of grade even more subtlety into something than like paint it very subtly. Like, this feels kind of subtle, but it's not really. Like, it could be more subtle than this for the impression. I generally try and sort of put that stuff in like this and then knock it back, and it gives you a bit more. Oh, I just can't be as subtle when I paint things initially, I guess. Alter Adele, thank you for the follow. Welcome to the stream. Thanks for the new follows, by the way, everyone. It's much appreciated. And like I said, if you got any questions about what I'm doing, or anything like that, what I'm up to, who I am, whatever, let me know. I'm happy to answer. You're not disturbing me at all. But yeah, well, welcome to the stream in any case. I stream 3 days a week at the moment. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. I'm not sure if I'll be able to stream tomorrow. Yeah, I'm waiting for an appointment. And if that appointment, if they call me today, it's going to be tomorrow. So we'll see about that. But anyway, usually Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday during the week, I'll be here working on various different things. All of the streams will be on YouTube afterwards. There's a link on the page here to YouTube where all the VODs are saved, so you can watch back any of the older ones, or if you missed like any sort of smaller tutorials I do during the streams on various techniques, you can catch them all there on the YouTube. So yeah, give that a follow. They go up immediately after it's like saved here. I'm actually streaming on YouTube right now as well, but I just don't have the YouTube chat open. So if anyone's talking on YouTube, I don't know what's going on. So come over to Twitch. Great art, thank you. And no, thank you. I appreciate the compliments. It's very, very kind of you to say. So yeah, all these like details are going back here. I say details, just colors. These are going to get crushed back even more. Like, let's turn the grading on. You see, they get crushed together even a bit more than this, but they are there to give a bit of an impression of something there. So I'm trying to keep these assembled up into kind of larger sort of shapes of color, not get too bogged down on like every tiny rock or anything. The impression, again, is more important than the detail. So actually just assembling up the shapes into something larger is preferable to painting a ton of detail. So just let your strokes be bold. Let the shapes have a sort of graphic design to them that, you know, helps to tell the story or push the eye in a certain direction. Don't overdo it. Easier said than done, but we try. I'm just trying to give the shapes, like, I'll do it in red here, trying to sort of give this impression with the shapes. A Gamer Draws, thank you for the follow. Welcome to the stream. Yeah, trying to give this impression so that essentially we're continuing this line from the boat up through here, so it's like a curve. So I'm giving that impression through these shapes that, you know, start to give that like twist to this, so that it's just guiding the eye up there in this way. Again, design every shape. Think about where it's going, what story it's trying to tell. Not what story, which direction it's trying to drive the eye, basically. It's important. If you have enough things that are sort of driving the viewer's eye around, your illustration will be very readable and people will understand what it is they're meant to be looking at. If you can basically drive the viewer's eye to where you want them to look, or things that are important for the narrative, then your illustration is going to be easily readable and understood. The narrative will be understood, and in that way it becomes much more memorable, because the viewer isn't looking at it being like, what is going on here? I don't understand it. They're actually being directed to the most narratively important pieces of the illustration straight away, which lets them understand the narrative, which again makes it more memorable because they got it straight away. If the viewer is looking at a piece and being like, feels a bit lost about what they're looking at, and they're just like, wow, it's just kind of busy, I don't really, what's this? Oh, there's that. Oh, okay, that's this, blah, blah, blah. If they're doing that, they're not focused on the narrative, and therefore your image becomes a bit of a task to look at, and because they didn't get the narrative straight away, or where they were meant to look, then it becomes forgettable. And, you know, people don't look at these things for very long. So you got to make conscious decisions about how to drive the eye, and you know, getting people to look at where you need them to look narratively straight away. And like I said, it'll make it more memorable overall. So what is this grading layer? So these are just notes, right? So I don't know if you know anything about color grading for films, but essentially when a film is filmed, the way that it looks in the camera as they're filming it, the raw out the camera footage isn't what you then just see in the cinema. The film goes through color grading, where they take that film, they will play with the colors, the values, the saturations, to some extent, not the actual lighting, but the perception of the lighting in the scene. And they will do this to give the film a mood and a story and so on. So, for example, a film like The Revenant, you know, is very sort of like this kind of overcast, cold, dark, very blue overall, etc. All of that is graded into the footage after it's done to give it a complete mood to the whole film. So what I am doing is I'm painting the image kind of as close as I can to what I want it to look like finished, but essentially there's going to be some post-processing that I do to the image to sort of finally pull it all together, and this is in the same vein that a color grader would do in a film. So these layers in here, for example, I have a lighten layer that kind of pulls all of the mid-ground values together. I have a multiply layer which will kind of vignette the image and lower the contrasts around the edges of the image and kind of give the slightly darker mood. And then again, I have another multiply layer which is basically just doing the same thing here. So these are my notes for later on. When I come to finishing the image, I'm going to sort of open these up and kind of redo these layers, but much more specifically to what the image is like at the time. And these are going to be, you know, my grading layers that are going to just give me that final push and finishing touch to the mood. So I had made some like notes, these kind of scribbles over the image here that I'm still going to kind of address. And I also made these very quick grading layers, which are essentially telling me, okay, this is how we're going to adjust the values when we're at the finishing touches. And I just keep these on top here as like something to reference in the image. And yeah, I just put it in a folder called grading for now, just to know. So that I can quickly sort of zoom out and turn this on and be like, okay, am I heading in the right direction? Is this too detailed for what eventually will be crushed out for the grading and so on. It's just a notes for the future, basically. A gamer draws. Hello from YouTube. Haha, brilliant. I love how expressive the shape language is. Any advice for practicing transforming references into more expressive design shapes? I am way too subtle and safe. Yeah, let me quickly just put this here while I open up a folder that we did from the other day, because this probably illustrates it a bit better. And I'll go into it for you. And whilst we're doing that, I'll just grab my lunch. Oh, spilt banana huel all down me. Right. So, here we go. Back to Photoshop. Didn't click it in time. Dumbass. So, yeah, a few streams ago, I spent a couple of streams working on this. This was, and this is why it's going to answer your question a bit better than the other one, is this was actually done as a stylization study of this above photo. So the whole point of a stylization study in this sense is to take a reference image, i.e. this photograph, and redesign the shapes of it to be more stylized, and in effect to have a little bit more control over the composition and the sort of leading lines and shapes for this. And the way we went about this was initially to, I'll turn off all of this. Yeah, the way we went about this initially was to actually draw out some very basic shapes that are what is happening in here, but doing it in a way that is much more simplified and, as you said, more expressive. So on this one, you know, there are these like verticals of the trees. Okay. There is the perception of like a sort of an edge or a part of the landscape like this that goes through here. There's this bit that goes up this way. These trees kind of come down like this, and you know, this river kind of wiggles its way up like that in here, and you know, trees, etc. So I'm looking at this and like this is lovely, right? It's really nice nature. But if I'm stylizing it, what I want to try and do is lead the eye more directly in and around the image. And I also want to simplify shapes down into just one or two decisive lines instead of the much more detailed and in some cases not rhythmic rhythms of nature, and align these things kind of in a way that is closer to design principles rather than just copying nature. So what we decided to do here was with these impressions, like here I get an impression of an edge, right? Dark, light, so on, the shapes of the trees. So I'm sort of simplifying these areas down into just clearer, more graphic shapes. So I'm starting to see something like this in here. You know, the river I just essentially simplified into something like this. You know, this edge through here, the tree bank coming down like this. We decided to curve the trees slightly and sort of do this to help it sort of frame the image. So I'm taking the implied rhythms that I see from like the tops of the trees, or like the value of change here, and I'm simplifying them down into much larger, more distinct shapes. And then when I started to build up this image into its kind of final state, instead of just being random about the placement of things, it was basically trying to align things to these rhythms that I'd set up, so that it more strongly has that effect. So if I go back, hopefully I've got enough history states here to just turn all the layers back on. No! Hang on, let me close this and reopen it 1 second. Then we'll go into it again. But I do this in reference to the photograph initially, because I need that visual information there to hang on to. So while that opens again, yeah, here we go. So now when we see, you know, the final study, where this once was a very sort of detailed wiggly edge that has that general inclination and curve, now it's like much more graphic and stylized, and there are these perceived lines that this one like has, but it's very much broken up in the way that it's naturally arranged, and the textures and so on, whereas this one has just a sort of a sharpness and a graphicness to it. And I think it just comes from learning to simplify things, like trying to see rhythms in the natural arrangement of things. And if something like this, like, here's maybe a micro example that helps. This rock, if I was going to draw around it, has like this shape to it, and it's like this is now maybe 30 different changes of direction. It makes the shape very complicated, whereas this, you know, has what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 6 surfaces. EO7EO, thanks for the follow. So this is much more simpler and stylized, and what I've taken is the general idea of this curvature, this straight, this diagonal, and so on. I've taken those general ideas and just glossed over the fact that there is any more detail than that. And so I stylized the shape, and then that's what makes it feel, you know, a little bit more purposeful and designed and interesting in a way, like interesting in a stylized way. And I do that with everything. Like this has a lot of detail, this kind of perceived edge of value change. I just simplify that to one line. It's still doing the same thing, but it's now simplified. This edge where it's like the edge of the river, very kind of complicated, right? Like this. And it's still here, but I just sort of take that and turn it into this. Trying to lose like 80% of the detail. My name blank01. Thank you for the follow. So again, these trees, they generally align on this kind of thing, and I would say I've basically just done something very similar that is already there, so ignore that. But yeah, hopefully that helps. Simplifying the line count is definitely a thing. Look for the general direction that something is going in, and try and work with that. Another thing I try and do is here, like this edge kind of wiggles out this way, and this one sort of down here, and so on. And then further, sorry, this one sort of does this. This one sort of does this. And there's like the perception of another one back here that's like this, right? And then here. And they sort of, yeah, okay, they're going in this direction vaguely, right? What I try and do is think, okay, I'm going to have this strong line. I'm going to give this one the appearance of actually meeting at the same point somewhere in the image. And this third one also kind of comes up with this in mind. So there's kind of like a point at which all certain lines are kind of radiating out from a similar point in the illustration. And it gives the illustration kind of energy because things start to converge into similar places and have a similar design to them. Whereas these, like this line and this line, like might not ever meet. That just keeps wiggling this way and that just keeps wiggling like that. And this one maybe even wiggles off that way. And it doesn't have a sort of a pulling and a conciseness to it that helps guide the eye. So those are considerations to make when trying to stylize an illustration, and especially working from reference. So when it comes to like this one, which is like much more of an invented thing, I take those same principles and I'm trying to push them even further because I'm not referencing any one thing in particular. So I went through this earlier, so I won't go into it loads, but you know, there is the perception of lines that come from the landscape that are all seeming to emanate from this point, okay? Or push us towards this point. Like the tops of these rocks, for example, are all doing this edge of the sand and the water, this bottom edge of the boat, the horizon line here, this shape, and then these ones all start to push in here, so they're starting to converge along the bottom. So pardon me, sorry. And then this line, these lines, this clouds eventually have this kind of view to it. Sorry, I got the dry throat. Yeah, these lines all coming in. So when you start to think of everything being arranged like this, regardless of the image underneath, there is just like a flow and an origin point and a sort of an energy to this. Let's get rid of the painting for a second. There is a flow and a sort of convergence happening. You know, there is energy that points us here quite a lot, as indicated, and there are these sort of counterflows that are kind of making small sort of eddies and shapes and currents that provide a little bit of interest because they're counterpoints to this, but then they have much less influence in terms of the overall visual energy and pulling that this has. So the composition is arranged around this idea from the very beginning. And if I've got my sketchbook here, the first initial scribbles that I did for this were basically this with a small amount of indication as to what there was going to be in the illustration. So I'll show you that now. But you see, that was basically me being like, okay, well, I want to do a shipwreck, and these are the general sort of shapes and energies that I want the piece to have in terms of layout, and that's what I'm going to follow, and that's how I'm building this stuff up, is thinking general to specific. Always, you'll hear me say this a lot when I'm talking about any concept to do with art, really. But general to specific. And this way, if I sort the general, the big thing out, this, the energy, the overall flow of the composition, if I sort that out first, any details that I put in that follow this are only going to enforce this idea and help the composition. So I need to start by thinking of this big image, devoid of any details first. Just where is the focal point going to be and how am I going to point at it? And if I just draw these kind of lines and scribbles first in my sketchbook, I then know whatever I do on top of that is going to work, because I can follow these lines and I can keep drawing the eye into this idea, and the composition will work from that point onwards. So right now, when I was detailing a little bit these rocks, I'm not making random shapes. I'm trying to, let's make another one of these. I'm trying to keep the eye moving up the image in this direction by the way that I arrange my lines and shapes. And every part of the image I'm doing that in, to try and do that. You know, all of these shapes, they all seem to converge in a sort of similar area. So it keeps the... Oh, shit, you can't see what I'm doing. So these lines here, as what I was saying, they're all converging up this way. And it's just being aware of this at every point. And I think what makes it difficult in the beginning is you are probably having to focus on the execution of things and just generally like trying to paint and stuff. And these kind of like higher concepts, if you like, are a little bit harder to ingratiate into your working, because you have to think a little bit more about the basics, your color choices, your rendering, and all of this kind of thing. Whereas actually painting stuff for me is not now super difficult. It's just more of this kind of compositional stuff where it's like, is it helping or hindering my composition? Is it going in the right direction? So on and so forth. So there you go. Sorry, I just got a reply on a text message. But yeah, hopefully, I mean, if you got any more questions around that, just let me know. The knowledge is crazy. Knowledge. Miguel Monkey, thank you for the follow. Thank you so much. That was amazing. I can see that the VODs are on YouTube, so I'll definitely watch the full process of these pieces and practice with. Yeah, the Misty Forest illustration that I showed you before, the stream that we start that on, I talk about this stuff quite a bit in the beginning. And also yesterday's stream where we started this image, I also talk about that stuff quite a bit. But yeah, I don't mind going over this stuff over, you know, it's, you know, part of the reason I like doing these streams is to answer these kind of questions and share things that I have come across, you know, my journey is learning to paint, and especially that landscapes is something that I'm less proficient at. You know, these kind of insights are insights for myself as well. A lot of the time I end up explaining things and being like, oh yeah, that is actually what I'm doing. Which helps. Also love where this piece is going. Thanks, Cal. Much appreciated. I too am enjoying this image. Ren Makia, thank you for the follow. Much appreciated. Welcome, welcome. A Gamer Draws, thank you. Really appreciate you taking the time to share so much. It's no problem. I enjoy teaching. And working on stream is a really nice way for me to share this kind of stuff as well. I get a lot of work done on stream, despite talking all the time, because I'm sort of, forced to engage with the image and not like go on the internet or mess around. So I really like being on stream for that reason, because I get a lot done. But yeah, it also enables me to sort of go into this stuff in a lot of detail. And like I said, a lot of the time I end up sort of highlighting to myself to a certain degree, like what am I actually doing at certain points, and like it helps me understand my process more, which really helps me, obviously. So I'm happy to go over things as and when it's applicable and sort of comes up. And sometimes as I'm explaining something, I'm looking at my image and then I'm like, oh, actually I'm not doing that here, and I should. So it helps me figure out a lot of the mistakes. Ren Makia, hello, amazing art. Thank you, Ren Makia. That is very kind of you to say. Everyone's very big on the compliments today. You're all very kind. All right, so let's do a little bit of this man in the background. It's a really great image. Thanks, Dan. Encart, thank you for the follow. Also, man, getting the lunchtime rush here on Twitch. A lot of the follows coming in. I'm getting everyone on lunch break checking Twitch. Yeah, welcome. Thanks for all the new follows, everyone. It's much appreciated. I have been on a break from streaming for years now, because just working full time and yeah, just not twitching, not streaming. But yeah, I'm having a little break from work at the Mo, and decided that actually I want to stream and like work on some personal work and learn how to do more environment stuff and so on. So I'm streaming 3 days a week, or trying to stream 3 days a week at the moment. All the VODs are on YouTube as well. If you follow the link on the page, you'll find the YouTube. So all of these VODs are on there, and they can be rewatched at any time. I'm also streaming live on YouTube right now. I'm just not looking at the YouTube chat. So yeah, watch however you want. I think the VODs on YouTube are like better quality as well than the ones on Twitch, and the Twitch ones get deleted after 2 weeks anyway, so yeah, enjoy. There you go. Dan's got the link. The homie with the hookups. Uber, welcome. Uber, one of the OG Heath stream enjoyers. Sorry. Itchy ass nose. Yeah, sorry, I'm just doing a little bit of scribbles on the mountains here. Essentially, a lot of these mountains are just going to be like, you know, very far in the background. The values of them are going to be very tight, and sort of crushed together, so they don't need a lot when it comes to detail, and they're far enough back in the image that they can just be resolved as scribbles. How to draw mountains. Just scribble. Just scribble them. I am indeed ancient. Yes. Where are you? Where are you? Shape. He's part of the clouds. Okay. Okay. Got him. Got him. Sort of been avoiding the clouds for a little bit because I had a bit of a battle with them yesterday, and the shape of them is kind of generally where I want them to be, but I'm not like happy with them right now. But damn, I had a bit of a battle with them yesterday, so I've been avoiding them today. We're not on speaking terms. Okay, mid-rock. Flab Slab, thanks for the follow. Everyone's very creative with the names, I've gotta say. I'm just Heath. Okay, so I wanted a bit more like boat skeleton stuff around the image. If I turn on my visual notes from before, you can see I got like a bit of boat ribs popping up and a bit more debris and stuff, and maybe there's a bird, maybe there's a crow that's going to make his way in. But yeah, definitely some more boat debris. Doesn't quite feel like Shipwreck Cove at the moment. It feels like, oh, there's a couple of wrecks, but it ain't Shipwreck Cove, you know. So wanted to get a bit more like recognizable sort of shapes in there for that. And this is why, to a certain degree, Friendship with Clouds is over. Yeah, it's defo over. Yeah. Overcast kind of windswept clouds are really hard to do. I much prefer painting like big cumulonimbus, like big poofy fluffy clouds. They're much easier in my opinion. When you do something like this where it's just like very wispy and windswept, you can just one stroke that's got like too hard an edge can just ruin it. And it's really difficult to be like vague and designed at the same time. They need to be sort of soft enough and have enough of a sort of strung out kind of feel to them that they feel like clouds on a windy, stormy day. But I still want them to be stylized and have a certain shape to them. It's very difficult to get that middle ground. So yeah. Anyway, yeah, this ship in the foreground, this like ship skeleton, right? It's fairly detailed, right? Is in as much as you can tell what it is, and it's kind of up there in the front of the illustration and so on. This is partly for the shape and the sort of lead into the image, but also it's there to sort of show, okay, this is a ship, a skeletonized ship, and these are the shapes that it has. And so wherever you see similar shapes, we can extrapolate with our minds that we're seeing the same kind of thing. So that's why this kind of works, because it has this same kind of rib shapes to it, and so on, and why this appears like a bit of a shipwreck and so on. So when I introduce like behind this rock like a few of these kind of rib shapes of like a broken ship, we start to think, oh, okay, this is another part of a broken ship here, and not just like rocks that have a rib shape and so on. It's to help the I guess don't know what the word would be, but yeah, it's there for a reason. It's instead of a crow, it could be an albatross or a seagull. Said to be souls of dead sailors back in the day. Oh, really? That's interesting. I did not know that. I did not know that. Yeah. Just trying something out here. I don't know if it's ultimately the right thing, but I did want a bit more of an impression of like shipwreck stuff here. Actually, I'll do this in the middle, because this one I'm not kind of happy with, because yeah, I'm just not. So let's rigging mid. There we go. Even though I said yesterday, you can just control click on a layer to find it. I never do it. Are you using any reference at all? Yeah, I do have references. They're here. I look at them before stream and just like fill my head with what's there, and then I don't really look at them so much. But I do have certain references for mood, for colors, and so on. But like I said, I don't really look at them on stream so much, because yeah, I'm trying to recall, but also trying to not get overly influenced by exactly what's going on in those images, and just try and do something where I'm designing the shapes a bit more, and I'm kind of a bit more in control of the finished look. So yes, short story. There are references, but they're more to be recalled from than looked at directly. That's not to say that looking at reference directly is bad or anything. It's just that I find that having references open full time when I'm doing something that is meant to be a bit more sort of invented sometimes can lead to me not making decisions myself about what things should be, and therefore I can sometimes lose like the stylization that I'm going for, or essentially take a little bit too much influence from the reference and not let myself design shapes and the look of something. It can be a little bit too distracting at a certain point. And I don't say this to like toot my own horn, but I'm very good at copying things. At this point in my artistic journey, like I'm very good at copying things. So if I have it open, especially if I'm on stream, because I'm having to concentrate on talking as well as drawing, that it's too easy for me to sort of relax and start copying the reference, and before you know it, I have copied that and not really designed anything myself, and it becomes a little bit like I don't like the illustration in the end because it's got nothing of my own design and thoughts in it. It's just like a sort of an elaborate copy of something. But yeah, I think people know what I mean when they say that I'm good at copying stuff. Well, past a certain point in your artistic development, like you can copy stuff really, really well. And it becomes a bit of a problem if you're not concentrating. You just copy and you're like, oh shit. Oh shit. Yeah. For different things, though, like having it open is definitely necessary. When I was doing the sort of Misty Forest one, I was intentionally having the ref open because the point of the study was to stylize what was there. So I needed to have a constant reminder of it for that. And obviously for the viewers as well to see what I'm trying to do. But that was specific to the study itself, was trying to do exactly that. So it makes sense to have it open. But yeah, for this, it doesn't really make sense for it to have those things open, because I will just copy something and then I'll be like, oh, okay. Well, I did like that in the original image, and I've just kind of copied it and not really brought what I wanted to the table. So And there's a certain sort of mood and video gamey sort of feel to this that I wanted to bring. And like I said, I've been at beaches that are stormy like this when I go surfing, and there's just a certain feel and stuff and colours of the day, and like the way things look that I remember from doing stuff like that, and I feel like that should drive the look of the illustration more. Right, quick sip of Huel, save my image. Save. I feel like I'm gonna try this out on the top of everything here, but I feel like I need like a bit of something more in the foreground that sort of reaches in a little bit. Maybe some of these kind of ship ribs and they overlap here. I don't know. Maybe it's something like even more egregious than that. Let's have a look. It's feelings time. This is when, like, you watch Bob Ross, right? And you're like, oh, okay, it's going okay. Like, I guess he's done a nice lake there, and it's got some trees, a bit of a mountain in the background. And he just whops out the brush, like, dips it in black, and then just puts, like, a big fucking tree, like, right down the middle. And you're like, damn, he's ruined that. He's actually ruined that. This is that part. But you got to try these things out to know. And like, unlike Bob Ross, Kevin D, thank you for the follow. Unlike Bob Ross, I'm working digitally, so I can just turn this layer off if I don't like it. He commits sometimes so hard to something that looks ultimately like maybe an ill thought out decision. So hard. It boggles my mind. Happy little shipwrecks, yeah. Oh, come on. Kevin D, hello. Hello. Welcome. Welcome. Thank you for the follow. I don't mind them in this corner, actually, to be honest. Like, it feels kind of nice. Okay, well, leave them there for a sec while I think about some other stuff. The other thing I was thinking about was like some kind of like old bits of sail that are still maybe attached with like rigging a little bit in places. Ropes are kind of quite a or ropes or like anything that's like hanging down. It's quite a nice addition to an illustration because it gives it a little bit of almost like a sense of place and purpose, and like these kind of more tertiary details can just sort of enliven the scene, and they provide a way to sort of overlap stuff in a very sort of definite manner, but without sort of committing too much to covering things up. So like having, you know, if you're in a jungle or whatever, it's like having vines and leaves and stuff hanging down, but here it would be like ropes and rigging, bits of sail, stuff like that, where they can just be sort of quite graphic in their appearance and like what they're doing, and they can just really help to, it's a small detail that can help lead the eye around, and you can add like counter movement to things. You can like put a rope that just goes straight over something, and it's not that distracting, but it does add like a nice touch to things. I'm just thinking about where I can maybe place certain things like this to be a bit more interesting. Let's just get rid of that for now. I will always do this at a certain point in an image as well. It's just kind of experiment on top of it a little bit, figure out what's there. You know, you spend some time rendering stuff, it makes you sort of slow down. And when you do stuff like this, you can sort of speed up again and be a bit faster and just be like a bit more brutal with changes, and it can, I don't know, it's just a nice change of pace. Sometimes you can just figure something out quite nice that you want to add. And I'm just warping the shapes here to get something a bit more interesting. I talked about this yesterday, essentially, like you are right or left-handed, most likely. I mean, there's not many ambidextrous people. And you get comfortable drawing like lines in a certain direction and so on, and it becomes then difficult to make very unique strokes, and so all of your curves tend to have the similar curvature to them, and a similar width and length and so on, and over the course of an entire illustration it can actually stick out and look a bit weird. And so I always, when I paint shapes in, I will sort of paint what I'm trying to do, and then I'll warp it or distort it into a new shape and try and find something that I wouldn't have actually painted with my own fair hands. And that way I keep my shapes interesting, and I am not repeating the inherent style that just comes from being like right-handed and drawing lines in a certain direction and using the same kind of brushes and so on. It's just a way of taking a little bit of the repetition that my own style brings to something out of the illustration. If you were close to a ship's ribs, they could be quite large. What if one cut up the side of the image, disappeared off the canvas and reappeared at the top as though you were almost peering through it? Could use it to direct the eye to the focal point again. Yeah, exactly. So you could definitely use it as like a frame within a frame to do that. I'll show you something that I had initially thought of in the illustration, which could be quite interesting. I'll show you in a sec. Valentina Remenar. It's the big Tina. Hello, Alex. This is looking absolutely badass. I'm loving the stuck ship in the far background. Thanks, Tina. I really appreciate it. Thank you for tuning in. Yeah. Thank you. Much appreciated. Good to hear from you. I hope you're doing good. Yeah. There you go. Yes, what was I saying? Yes, so you were saying peering through the ship. I did initially have this idea with this ship in the foreground, that we were going to be inside it basically and looking through it. You know, that we were going to be... actually, let me grab the actual view on Sketchfab. I'll show you. 1 second. So, this is where I grabbed my references from for those ships. Sketchfab is brilliant for this. You can just search up a 3D model. I never download them or anything. I'll show you basically how I do it. I'm just trying to find that actual shipwreck. So there's that one. What was the other one? It wasn't too far down, if I remember correctly. Now, yo, Sketchfab, why are you doing this to me live? Huh? Yeah, I'm gonna crash out. I'm crashing out. Let's try it one more time. There's this one. Right, we already have this one. Okay. Okay, that's the one we already have referenced, but I have a different one that I swear was like... There it is. God, you were almost about to witness a valid crash out just then. I had an absolutely insane few weeks, so I'm happy that I can finally catch your stream. Nice to see your art again. That's very kind of you. Thanks for tuning in, and yeah, let's catch up. let's catch up now the insanity's over. So, yeah, what I was thinking initially when I found this ref is that, yeah, like you're saying, place the camera inside the wreck like this. You know, and then like frame the focal point like up here so that we sort of have this frame within the frame to do that. But what this one cut out was like the vastness of the landscape, and it would be a much more about sort of what was inside the ship in that sense. And I was like, didn't really want to do that. But like you were saying, having like the ribs in the foreground that go in and out of the image, we could try something and see if it works. And have a look. But anyway, Sketchfab, really good resource, you know, for 3D models. And like I said, I'd never really download them. I just will go in the viewer, like find the angle that I like for reference, screenshot it, and then just that would be my reference, you know, for the shapes. And that's basically what we did. That's exactly what we did, in fact, for these references. You know, so this and this kind of made up my own boat, but in reference to like the things that I liked about this and the things that I liked about this, kind of recreated them here, but in my own painting rather than, you know, photo bashing it or something. So yeah. Any hoodle. Let's have a go back to just trying out some sort of bold shapes in here and see if we can find something that we like. I ultimately don't know if I'll keep a lot of this stuff in here. It's just more like you don't know if you don't try. You know what they say, you lose 100% of races you don't enter? There's no harm in me trying out like big, bold sort of compositional things like this on a separate layer and just being like, does it work? Does it offer something different? Is it interesting? Does it reframe something or give us a bit more depth and so on? And like sometimes I go with the ideas that I come up with like this, and other times I'm like, no, it changes it a bit too much. Or there's like a halfway where, you know, it's like, okay, this works and this doesn't, and this covers up like too much of something and so on. And ultimately, like, what story is it telling? Because without these ribs on here, what you see is that it's much more of an establishing shot. You know, it's much more of a, we've entered this loading screen before this level, and this is what we're looking at. Whereas if I put these ribs like right up here in the foreground, it's a bit more like we are like hiding in the wreckage, and this stuff is right in front of us, and it makes the image a little bit more, I don't know, personal in a way, and less like an establishing shot. It sort of changes the mood a little bit to being like, I'm here, I'm in this place, I'm trapped behind this stuff, and so it just gives a different impression. And ultimately, it's, you got to decide if it's what you want. And there's no harm in trying this stuff out and just seeing if it works, and maybe being like, not this time, but next time I'm going to do this because I want this kind of feeling in the image. Never thought about using 3D models for refs other than poses somehow, taking notes. Yeah, I do it all the time, man. They're great, especially for landscape stuff. Or, here's a classic one. What I used to do, if I had a weapon, or a character, let's say a character that I was drawing has a weapon. Let me bring up ArtStation. So for example, this guy, I made these guns, not very simply, not even with the wings on or anything, but I made this Picatinny rail on the top, and I made this kind of blocky chamfered shape in 3D, and then I oriented that with this sketch in the background in 3D, and then screenshotted that stuff out and painted over it for this part of the image, because getting this Picatinny rail correct enough in a painting, when you hand paint it, you could paint this for just as long as you painted the rest of the image and still get it wrong, because perspective needs to be correct on this stuff for it to not make any sorry, it needs to be correct for you not to pick it up as being wrong, right? So having a 3D model that I made for those makes this much better. Similarly, I made the 3D model for the grenade because it has a lot of ellipses on it, right? It has all these circular bits and these ellipses in space, and it's just easier to do that in 3D and then know that the ellipses are correct and then paint over it here to make it fit within the illustration and so on. And so that was part of the process, and I would spend quite a bit of time, even though the models are basic, making those things. So for Doomfist, these knuckles, like these knuckle shapes here, and this front plate with the spikes on it, these bits are 3D. The rest of it is all painted, right? But this is 3D, painted over. Because again, ellipses. They got to be correct, otherwise they just look wonky, and then it becomes the thing that stands out in the image as being incorrect. So that's 3D here. For this illustration, I made like a floor plane, like just this floor, and I put a cylinder on it, and I put another cylinder on it for the mast and so on. And that was the underpinning for the perspective and 3D on this, because it was such a just like weird camera angle and so on. I just needed some grounding for that to start with and help with the perspective. Yeah, her hammers were 3D, a very basic 3D model. These stars, they were a very basic 3D model. In here, etc. You're starting to see the point here. Anything that has an ellipse, this was a basic 3D model without the badge on it or anything, but just a few cylinders like in each other, these edges, this. So anyway, you can see that was part of the process for a while, right? Because I did learn to do some 3D. I learned a bit of ZBrush, I learned a bit of 3D coat and so on. And some of these older artworks, there's a lot of 3D mixed in with photos and all sorts of stuff, right? But then as I got into illustration, I was using it to help out with certain things, namely ellipses or anything that was kind of very difficult to get correct in perspective. But more and more, I can paint that stuff now. So there's no 3D in this one, for example. And the only 3D in this one was these daggers, which are very specific to the game. They wanted to be in there. But anyway, what I then started to do was like, oh, Sketchfab is really good. Sketchfab is really good. And so now if I want a sword in an image, I'll be like, sword. And even though I'm not going to use the design of this sword, I will find something that's like similar to what I want. Let's say it's this. I'm like, it needs to be like a stylized World of Warcraft style sword, right? So then I'll do my illustration, I'll draw the sword out, but then I'll go into Sketchfab, I'll open this viewer up, and I will put this into like the right angle that I need for my illustration. So let's say it's being thrown towards us like this, and my character's behind it, or they're holding it out like whoosh. So I just put this in the correct orientation, screenshot that, and then use that as the basis for then painting, because it's quicker now than me making the model, right? And this is where I'd think that AI would be very helpful, right? Because now, instead of me using this reference that is not the sword that I want, it just is the right angle, I could maybe do a sketch of the sword that I want, use like a sketch to 3D AI to give me a very basic model of the actual thing that I wanted, and then do the same thing, just put it in the right angle, and then I'd paint over it again. And that's quicker and better than me modeling it myself and spending a few hours doing that to reach the same end, which essentially is just getting a reference for me to work over. And that's where I feel like a good use of AI could come in to the process for me, because I'd still be using my own design. I would literally sketch my own sword out, and it's just taking that and using that to make the 3D that I'm after. And that saved me like half a day of doing that. And it's like, okay, well, why would you want to save half a day? XYZ. Time, very much money as an illustrator. And while you can be lucky to get a day rate for certain jobs, sometimes you're only going to get paid for the job itself and not the time that you've spent on it. And so if I can spend more time actually rendering the image and doing the important stuff and making sure the quality's good, etc., and I can use something like a 3D model or a photo reference, or in this case, a model that I generate from a sketch that I make, those things are going to ultimately give me better quality and get me closer to what I want in the final product, etc., etc. So yeah, I think there's a good use for it in that case. What I wouldn't say that is a good thing to do is just like straight up generate stuff with none of your own input whatsoever, and because that is going to be completely scraped, and therefore most likely going to be very close to something that's already out there. But if you're generating stuff using your own work and your own sketches and so on, I feel like, at least for me, that's fine. That'd be a good help here. I know I'm slow AF with Blender. Yeah, I'm slow with any 3D program that I use. I'm not good with it. It's not something that I think is worth the time investment for me to completely in and out learn Blender for actually the use case that I have for it, which is generally just sorting out things that are difficult to draw quickly, i.e. ellipses, weird angles on architecture, weapons, etc. So yeah. Truffle Snout, thank you for the follow. Welcome to the stream. But yeah, I know everyone has obviously their own opinions on AI and its uses and so on, and I would agree that yes, just straight up like generating images and painting over them and calling them your own would be a very egregious and shitty way to use it, and I wouldn't do that. Especially, yeah, I just wouldn't do that. But yeah, I feel like using it as a tool in the same way that I use 3D as a tool, in the same way that I use photos as a tool, in the same way that I use digital and not pencil as a tool, I think it is going to be a valuable tool in the process, and help elevate the creativity of artists to a certain degree. Now, I know that's probably not like a super welcome take for people. But if you can put emotions aside about AI for a second and just think a little bit about the fact that it's not going to go anywhere and that it is here, finding a useful way to integrate the things into your workflow so that you can concentrate more on the things that matter to you in your artwork, I think is, at least for me, something productive and a positive spin out of what is ultimately quite a negative thing, or at least so far perceived as very negative thing. So there you go. That's my opinion on that. No one asked for it. I might add, no one actually asked for that opinion. But yeah, I've obviously thought about AI and stuff quite a bit. I've practiced and used it just to see what it's capable of. And yeah, it is here and it's a tool. And it should be used as such, I think, to get a better quality of things. If I never used 3D or I never learnt to photo bash at a particular point, I would have far less repertoire in my skills and ability to do certain things in my illustrations now. So I'm just going to treat it in a similar way. It's another tool in the box to be used as tools should be, as and when it's needed, and to solve a particular issue, and not just like wholesale used. You don't use a hammer for everything, right? You use a hammer to bang in nails. So in the same way that I wouldn't use photo textures in everything, and I don't use 3D in everything. It's just another thing I can use. So yeah, anyway. But happy to discuss that stuff with people. I think it's an interesting topic, right? And you know, I'd be interested to hear maybe like counters to that, and we can talk about it if that's what people want to talk about. If you don't, then fine. But if you have a different opinion about it, like, I respect that you do. And if you don't like what I have said about it, I totally understand that. Each to their own, you know. But I did mention this yesterday, is like, it is here, right? AI is here. In the art industry, it is around, and it is going to be used in, you know, the development of games. I don't really see a world in which no AI is going to be used in game development at any point. Like, it is definitely going to be used. So I am only skilled at illustration, and, you know, being an art director. I am not skilled in anything else. Anian, that would enable me to earn as much money as I do as an illustrator and live the same comfortable life that I live right now. So even if I don't like AI and the moral implications of it and what it's doing, I am not going to just not work as an artist and give up my life, essentially, because AI has entered the chat. I am more than likely going to have to work with it. I am more than likely going to have to paint over some AI images. And like I said, if I want to continue the life that I currently live and pay my bills and mortgage and all of that stuff, then I'm going to have to work with it. So I'm just going to have to kind of suck it up and get with the program a little bit, and learn how to use it, and learn to use it in a way that benefits my work process and isn't too egregious. And yeah, I've sort of come to terms with that a little bit. You might think, okay, that sounds a bit sad, but I'm just being realistic. Like, my mortgage isn't going to get paid if I have to take another job somewhere that pays a lot less because I don't like AI. You know, like I cannot afford to do that. So I'm going to have to work with it. And therefore anyway, we spoke about it yesterday. But that's just where I am with it. I think the mentality of just like AI bad and leave it at that, I don't think is ultimately going to help people at the end of the day, unless you actually have another option in your life. Yeah, I don't like it. I don't particularly like it either, just to put that out there. But I'm just being realistic about my life and where I'm at in my life and the things that I need to pay for financially and so on. I don't really have the option to be like AI bad and just give up artwork. It's just not an option for me. So yeah, there you go. I already see timelines in work being shortened. A few years ago, I would have been given a few weeks, and now it's just a few days for a concept. Yeah, I mean, I'm yet to really be hit by this in illustration at the moment. I have not yet had to use AI in a work capacity, and I certainly haven't had any noticeable like decrease in deadlines for illustrations. That's not to say that it won't happen, but it hasn't come yet. It hasn't hit me yet. So I've yet to see how this will factor in and whether my assumptions are correct or not. But I feel like it will be something that we'll see over the coming years. I don't think it's quite going to have the initial kind of scaremongery impact that it was kind of initially thought to have. Like it was just going to be a complete like illustration does not exist anymore. Don't think that's going to be the case. But it's definitely going to have an impact. I just haven't seen it yet. It's taken a little while to get to that, but it will get there. Illucam. I think the main downside that could be argued in almost any discipline is it means fewer people will learn to do things properly and instead rely on AI. Be that a perspective drawing of a sword or writing an academic essay. With art, there's a risk of removing the soul a little bit. But like you said, is a tool better adopting than failing behind without? Yeah, and I see your point there, and you do raise a good point. I think as well, though, in a way, for a certain period of time, as in from now until it really starts to maybe get more editable, I, with my skills, my understanding of perspective, color, composition, all of that, am able to make conscious decisions and changes to an AI image that would ultimately benefit it. And that comes from experience, right? If we have people that are just coming into this from the idea of they just make prompts and they make images, even if they recognize something that is off about the image, they have no way to correct it. And therefore, there is a need still for the skill of an artist, someone who is trained to actually make sense of what AI still produces a lot of crap, right? And so there is a kind of a small niche there that still means that skill is necessary. But yeah, I do see that it would maybe mean, and probably already has meant, that people aren't even going to try and learn the skills because they're like, well, yeah, it's fucked. And I get that. In film, from what I saw, it was used a lot and processes that could be shortened were shortened. In some cases, my concept work was presented alongside generated images from the supervisor. Yeah. Definitely in concept, for sure, I can see this happening, specifically in film as well. Yeah. Castonia. I think it comes down to everyone has morals till something benefits them. And I'm not saying you to scold or judge you, because absolutely everyone is doing something that is on the back of someone else. But in general, I think showing pushback is important. We've been promised it will lower workload, yet we are all working the same hours for same pay. Yeah, I get you, and I do understand pushback is important in that sense. And yeah, I don't mean to come across like I don't have any pushback. I do. I've been through that. Let's say I've been through that part of the grieving process where I was very vehemently like, nah, fuck this. I'm not participating in it anyway. I'm not going to learn how to use it, blah, blah, blah. All of that. I've been through that already, and I've still come to the same conclusion that that's not realistically going to be good for me moving forward if AI is going to be a big part of the industry, or some part of the industry going forward. If I'm like completely not involved with it and don't know how to use it and can't work alongside it and just get angry at the mere mention of it, that's not going to help. Sorry, one sec. Sorry, it's more deliveries. Okay. But yeah, no, you raise a good point, and you know, like I said, I don't think you're scolding me. I understand. This is a discussion, and you know, I think for those people that know me, you know, IRL, you know that I'm not some kind of like AI shill, like very much a human. But yeah, I'm trying to think longevity for myself and my career. Like, if I'm not going to be able to jump ship into a different career, and so I'm going to have to work with AI for at least some amount of time, and I don't think it is necessarily a good thing what it's doing to. Well, it's not a good thing what it's doing to the industry and the people that have worked and made their livelihoods from it in any industry. I'm not just talking about art, but coding and you know, any sort of thing that is now getting automated and changed, and not for the good. Like, it's horrendous. But I've been through this thought process over the last couple of years, you know. I've arrived now at a point where I need to be a bit more realistic and not just act entirely on emotions, because emotions aren't going to pay my mortgage. So, and as kind of maybe harsh as that sounds, it's true. What am I meant to do? I'm just going to not pay my mortgage because I don't like AI. Like, it's not an option. It's not an option. And yeah, like you also mentioned, we all do stuff that, if we really want to drill down to it, is morally objectionable, right? And you just got to pick your battles. Like, I don't want to go into like what-ifism, but essentially there is a bit of that like in it. If someone's like, you shouldn't use AI, it's unethical, and I'm like, well, okay. You still got an iPhone though, don't you? Anyway, let me catch up on the rest of the chat. There is a need for an artist, but only if the client deems it worthy of the cost, not to be super doom. But it all comes down to cost. Alex, I'm so sorry, Alex, that you had to read my stroke-induced typing. It's okay, I can't type for the life of me either, so... Real Rumby. It's hard to show pushback, especially... Hang on. It's hard to show pushback, especially when I'm a mid-level artist in my company. At the end of the day, business is business, and the company wants to be as efficient as possible. Yeah, I feel you. It's out of your hands. You know, it really becomes out of your hands at a certain point. Like, are you going to work with it? No. Well, they will find someone that will, and then see you later. You know, it's tough like that. It's really unfortunate too, but we, at the end of the day, this is a job, and we are like very lucky to be doing such an amazing career. And you know, I have friends and have people that I talk to and meet and stuff, and people are always so amazed and excited that you know, there is something like being a digital illustrator out there as a career. And I have to remember that I'm very lucky to have this already. And yeah, anyway. My way of working around it is to make sure I'm not using it. Here they provide AI references, and I'm working around the idea, just using it as is. So I'm still using it as a sense, but choose not to generate it. That's it. Yeah, it's fair enough. Fair enough. I don't think that it's acting on emotions when people say they don't want to steal. That is not acting on emotions. No. I maybe misunderstood what I mean there, but what I'm essentially saying is I also don't want to steal, and this is where the difference comes in, because when I'm talking about the use of AI, I'd be using AI, generating things based on the inputs that I put in. And I don't mean a prompt, but I mean, if I want a 3D model of a particular weapon, I'm going to draw that weapon out, or I'm going to make a gray box of it, or I'm going to paint a quick version of it and then feed that into an AI to generate images off of what I'm feeding it, right? I'm not just going, generate me blue World of Warcraft style sword, because yes, that's scraped and that's just going to be generating stuff that already exists out there. But a lot of these sketch to 3D models, sketch to painting, that kind of stuff, where you're actually putting in your own input as the starting point for that and working based off of that, I feel like I'm in that process, and it's generating things off of what I am putting in, and I'm driving the design. Like, I want this shape, I want this color, I want this, you know, style, etc., etc. And I'm feeding that into it, which is very different, I think, than just prompting. And like I said, this is all hypothetical as well. I'm not currently using it for work. I'm not required to at the moment, etc. But like I'm saying, when people are acting off of emotions, like, they are talking like you are just, you know, a prompt jockey, right? And doing that, and that's not what I'm saying. Like, but yeah, there you go. Sadly, I am unfortunate enough that my art lead goes, could you make some variations with Midjourney and get it done by tomorrow? Yeah, this is what's coming in. I mean it in general. Stealing didn't mean AI this time. Didn't think through how it might come out. Okay, yeah, no, it's fine. Don't worry. We're good. Like I said, we're all having a discussion here. There's no animosity or anger or anything. Yeah. So there we go. But yeah, it's a good discussion to have. I'm glad that we can talk about this in a in an adult way, and it not become an emotional thing, because I've had these kind of conversations before, and I think some people are just so like hell-bent on like, yeah, AI's bad, 100% AI's bad, and so this conversation becomes an argument about morals, and I think we need to like be able to talk about it rationally and not have the morality come into it, so that we can have the discussion just about the topic and not about whether someone is right, someone is wrong, this is morally objectionable, this isn't. It's more like, can we just talk about it holistically? Like what is it? How is it going to impact our lives? What are ways that we could see to sort of figure out using it or not using it, that are kind of more morally sound for people, and yeah, just be adults about it, I guess. I'm glad we can have that discussion here about it, because quite often you can't. People just get immediately angry about AI and shut down the conversation, and it's like, well, how's this going to help us kind of figure it out? Because I don't want it to be around. Don't get me wrong, I don't want it to be around at all, and like I'm not gonna use it in my personal work at all, and so far I haven't been asked to use it in my professional work. I just know that it's gonna come, and that's gonna happen, and like I said, I'm not gonna give up my job at that point, because I have a life that I need to pay for and live, and I guess I'm not so strong in my morals in this particular case that I'm going to just throw my career down the drain because I don't want to use AI in a work capacity. So I guess that's what I should have said in the beginning, I guess. Yeah. But yeah, it's a tough one. It's a tough one. So, obviously we can still keep talking about AI, but I wanted to get you guys' opinion on the foreground ribs. Do we prefer, like, I guess without the big foreground ribs, or with the big foreground ribs? Do you think it covers up a little too much of the leading lines that the foreground ship offered? Or do you think it adds a nice bit of depth to the illustration that sort of helps the scale a bit more and gives us a bit more kind of placement? Like, I'd be interested to hear everyone's opinions on that. Tillul Floor. Tiluel Floor. Sorry if I've butchered that. Thank you for sharing your opinion. It opens a new perspective to me and a more nuanced way to see it. Oh, I appreciate you saying so, and yeah, I'm glad that maybe made you think about it a little differently. Like I said, I've been through several stages of like grief with the whole AI thing. I initially had quite a doom and gloom kind of meltdown about the whole thing, and then had to kind of come back and readjust and think about it a bit more realistically and so on. And obviously I talked to friends about it quite a bit, and yeah, I feel like my opinions have become a bit more realistic in terms of what it means for my actual life, and that's kind of helping me think through it a little bit more. So hopefully that was helpful for you too. Yeah, it's happening. Serb Arts, thanks for the follow. Hey, it's happening, and yeah, we need to talk about it, and I think you do a great job of approaching it. Thank you, Dan. Much appreciated. Annie Yun says, with the ribs. All right. Ilukam says, I think the minimal ribbing is best. So minimal ribbing is like this way. Okay. I love them ribs. Add some nice depth. The depth is good though. Just think you lose too much of the other wreck. Yeah, that was my concern. Yeah. Yeah, no, it's a tough decision. It's a tough decision. Yeah. Yeah, okay. I don't know either way. I'm supposed to know. Yeah, I think, like I was saying about the ribs in the first place, is like, in this shot, like this, it's more of an establishing shot that we're sort of entering the scene and, like, you know, walking from the cutscene into the game, and now, like, this is the sort of establishing shot, and this is where we're going to end up, right? But then when I do this, in a way, although it adds nice depth, it does kind of like shut the viewer out from the image a little bit. As in, like, there's something blocking the view, and it sort of takes me out of the image a little bit. Even though it is like directly blocking my view, so you think, oh, okay, it brings you in, but it sort of, in a way, is blocking me from entering the image a little bit, and that makes it feel a little impersonal, I guess, and like I'm not there, even though there's something like right in my face, if that makes sense. I'm gonna keep these layers in here, and I will turn them on and off periodically, and just work on the image like with them off, and then work on the image with them on, and in that way I just get a feel for like what feels good in the illustration, and maybe we can arrive at a point. Or when I post it, I just post it with both, and it's version 1 and 2. There we go, solved, problem solved. Problem solved by avoiding the issue entirely. Okay, Castonia. One input I can give, there is always something better. When someone tells you everyone does it like this or every place is the same, don't trust that. I've heard it at my previous workplace. That was a hellhole and people kept quitting left and right, and the ones that stayed kept saying these two things, that there is always hope if you don't like your workplace. So just really wanted to put this out there. Yeah, exactly. I think you have to this is going to sound silly, but I don't read movie reviews, right? Because I actually don't care what someone else who isn't me thinks about the movie past a certain point. If they didn't like it, they didn't like it for whatever reason, right? Those reasons, a lot of the time, that they don't like the movie don't apply to my enjoyment of a movie. I can watch a badly rated movie and enjoy it because it's funny, because it's so bad, or it has good action sequences but like really shitty story. I can enjoy those kind of things, and reviews therefore are completely useless because it's not me writing it. They don't know what I like, and I don't know who this person is, and they might not like it for some completely mental reason that I have never even considered because I'm not that person. So in that way, yeah, until you experience something yourself and go through an experience yourself, etc., you really don't have any idea of how to approach it, and you shouldn't necessarily take what everyone says about it as gospel because they're not you and they don't know how you should feel about things. We can obviously empathize with people and maybe think like, oh, they generally like similar things to me, so this would be the same and XYZ. But more and more, you got to have your own experience of things and therefore make your own opinions on things, and not just rely on what people say and tell you, and just listen to everything and come up with your own answers and stuff on your own. And therefore, yeah, you make a good point. That's it, Big Rib. Okay. I think you feel the expanse of the image less, doesn't feel as desolate. Yes, yeah, that's what I was saying basically. Valentina. I kind of like with the minimal ribs. It shows more of the wasteness of the space, and the emptiness makes it feel a bit eerie to me, at least. Yeah, I can vibe with that. Has a bit more of a sort of a desert feel about it in that sense, like it's quite desolate. The closest ship is too juicy to be covered up. There we go. And we cannot cover up the juice. But Alex, how will you agree with the internet? Fuck the internet. And also, if you review movies, you can't, like, inherently you can't like and enjoy life. I feel like there's something wrong with you. So you're coming into it miserable as a reviewer. We have chatted about it before, but yeah, my little bro doesn't even watch or play games. He just mimics the opinions of media that he sees from people he follows online. It's rage-inducing. Yeah, it's mad. You can tell when you're in a conversation with someone and they are like parroting something that they have previously just read an article on, and yeah, it's annoying in those kind of conversations to be around. I think it's just so useless. You may as well be I don't know. I don't really know what else to say about that. It's just annoying. But I think as well, it can just be, I think when you're younger, sometimes you just like want to be, you're not very comfortable in your own skin, and you really just want to be like accepted by your peers and people around you to a certain extent. And so I think some people will tend to like latch onto things that seem like popular opinion to fit in, and not necessarily something that they agree with, but it sounds right enough and the people around them are saying it, so it seems like a good opinion to have. But if you sort of ask someone about it and drill down into it a little bit, they actually don't really think that, and that it's clear that the opinion is not their own, and that it's just like being parroted. But I feel like I used to do that a lot when I was a teenager and like in my early 20s and so on. And I think it just came more from like, I don't really know myself, or was very like comfortable in my own skin, as they say. And it seemed easier to sort of find my personality in media and people that I sort of liked or parroted the opinions of, and it's only as I got older and such, and figured out actually I'm just like parroting these opinions. And getting in arguments, right, as well, with like, I would have an opinion that wasn't really mine. I would end up getting in an argument with someone about what we were talking about, and then I would basically lose that argument on the basis of it wasn't my argument in the first place, and I didn't actually know what I was talking about, and therefore I couldn't defend the opinion. And then I was like, actually this wasn't even my opinion, like I just got that from this. So I from that in sort of embarrassment, if you like, just kind of stopped doing that, and stopped then worrying about, well, I didn't stop worrying about this, but I think because I got embarrassed like that then I started to not look at stuff and so much, and then obviously you start to form your own opinions because you're not looking for opinions from other people, and then you figure out like, oh, I actually love this kind of thing, and I like this kind of music, and this, that, and the other, and you find stuff out for yourself rather than parroting it, and then you become a lot more confident in yourself because all of the things you do you're into, and you can talk about them, and you can justify your opinions because they're your opinions on stuff, and overall that makes you a little bit more like confident as a person, and then you come across differently, and people like it when you are genuine and they can tell that it's you, and what you're saying is your own opinions, and your confidence is your own because it's lived experience and so on. And I feel like for me that was just being sort of younger and uncomfortable in myself, which led to that. And you don't have to be young to be uncomfortable in yourself. I'm not saying that, oh, young people. It's just I was young when that happened to me, so that's why I'm saying that. But because I really hate it when people are like, oh, this just happens because like he's a teenager, so blah blah blah. I'm like, well, you don't have to be a teenager to be a knob, you can be a total knob as an adult. I've met plenty, and like young people are all good. I don't have any young people hate. But yeah, wow, we're really getting into it this afternoon, aren't we? We're really. I think that trend is horrible for gaming industry. The movies are still doing decently, even if a large group says some movie is BS. But in the gaming world, the game just dies before it even releases. Facts, yeah. the vocal people in the gaming audience, it appears, are militant in their opinions on everything, and yeah, it can really affect how a game is perceived or whether people will even pick up a game. It does seem there is more sort of outrage and stuff in every single game release right now. There's some fucking thing, but like I said, just try these games yourself and then make your opinion on it. Like, don't let some, fucking article or YouTuber be like, yo, this game's shit, full of woke BS or whatever. Just like play the game. If you like the game, then great. Then you found a game you like. If you didn't like it after you played it, great. You didn't like the game. Go and play another one. You figure it out. Go and play another game. You don't have to make it like your life's mission to just like review bomb the game because you didn't like it, kind of thing. It's kind of mental. Like, it's okay for us to have a differing opinion on things. There are games that you're gonna like that I'm gonna hate, and vice versa. And it doesn't matter to me if you like the game that I liked. It really doesn't. I could not care less, But for some people, it is be all end all. Like, but I think these people as well, they may make their personality about these opinions. Like, in a way, this used to kind of be the case when I was at high school. If you liked like metal, if you liked metal or any kind of like, guitar-based rock music or anything like that, you couldn't like rap music because you're in a different group. Like, there's a group of people at school that like metal, and there's a group of people at school that like rap, and there's a group of people at school that like pop music. And at high school, those people, those groups, they don't mix. Their personalities are the things that they like. So if you listen to rap, you also liked football, but if you listen to metal, you didn't play sport. Like, you couldn't be a guy that like played on the rugby team and listened to metal. No. Because your personality was everything to do with the things that you were into, and nothing to do with just you as a person. And like, when you become an adult, some people don't grow out of that. Like, there's some people that are just like, I am a metalhead, and that is everything, and that's fine. But for most people, you like all sorts of different stuff, and none of it really has anything to do with you as a person, or like what group you can be involved in. Like, I like deathcore. I also like, really weird EDM, and I like pop music from the 90s, and soundtracks and game soundtracks, and I think as a young person, your entire personality, for some people, is just wrapped up in like the things that you consume media wise, and therefore you can't branch out or won't branch out, and it gets very tribalistic like that, and it's kind of sad. But our whole culture is kind of become very tribalistic in everything. It's like you are either on team A or you're on team B or you're on team C. You can't just be yourself in a world. If you listen to this, you're this. If you listen to this, you're this. If you like this whatever sports team, then whatever, you know what I'm saying. It's just super annoying. I felt so bad for Concord because to me the game looked awesome. Gutted that I never got to play it. Yeah, I loved the stylized like concept art that I saw for Concord. It it made me think that maybe they were told to pivot to a realistic style at some point in the development, and that caused kind of like a lot of the designs that were done stylized to not really work so well in a more realistic setting. Because I think on paper, realistically, some of the character designs, they look pretty strange to me in terms of the color blocking, the design choices, etc. But then the concept art for them was much more heavily stylized, and it looked way better and made a lot of sense. So I feel like, this is just my opinion, but I feel like there was a style pivot at some point during the development, and that caused like a major problem with trying to use stylized designs in a realistic manner. I'll show you an example in a second. Let me just catch up with the rest of chat. Forgive the change of topic. Are you still sketching a lot traditionally? I'll get back to that. Castonia, you can't, Alex. Those are the laws of nature. Sorry. Yeah. Fuck. Yeah, subcultures used to matter a lot more, and now, for better or for worse, they're all merged. I don't even think they're all merged. I just think you get a bit older and you don't really care about the belonging to a certain group so vehemently that you can't branch out and just be normal about things. Tina, Alex speaking facts today and offering free therapy. Oh, welcome, yeah. It's Therapy Wednesdays here on the stream. But it's nice to talk about all this stuff, honestly. It's quite refreshing, honestly, to be in a space where you can just talk openly about all this stuff. So there was two things. One, I'll get back to your question in a sec, Ilukam. But on the subject of Concord, I'll show you what I mean. This is my theory, right? I'm just finding the example, the evidence that supports my theory, and obviously everything I say is right. Remember that. Remember that. So I can show you what I'm looking for, because it's but I saved some Concord concept art here, and this was where my conspiracy comes from. So just give me a sec to locate. Right, okay, here we go. So, and then let me just search up. Okay, so this guy, this character is this character, right? Fuck this. Right, is this blue dude. And everything I'm going to say here is just my opinion, right? I don't think this character looks very, very good. It's a little bit confusing, the sort of the color blocking and the simplicity of the outfit and the costume design for something that is realistically rendered. It feels a little bit unfinished and lacking a certain level of tertiary detail for something realistically rendered, okay? Now, this was my problem with a lot of the designs, is not necessarily the character themselves, but the color blocking being so simple, and it missing a level of tertiary detail to catch up with the realistic impression and lighting and so on that was going on. So anyway, when the concept art for this came out, for this character was concepted in a very stylized manner. Now, this would be a very weird way to concept for a realistic game. You wouldn't concept with such stylized shapes and brush strokes, color blocking, etc., if the end result was meant to be the way that Concord looked, a more realistic, stylized realism, let's say. So this makes me think that the game initially, and maybe even for some years of production, was actually a stylized game and was not meant to have the graphical fidelity and like graphic realness that the render style of the finished product has. And because of that, you know, this design probably maybe got to this sort of stage and then a pivot happens and they're like, we're pivoting to a more realistic style for whatever reason. Maybe they just thought that the market didn't want something so close to Overwatch, which is also a very stylized hero shooter. They were like, shit, we're actually making something that's really similar in that sense. We're going to pivot. We're going to make it a lot more realistic. We're going to maybe appeal to a bit of a different market, maybe a slightly older market. And they pitched the game and changed the style. And therefore, all of these kind of decisions that you would make when you were stylizing something don't actually work too well, because when you're stylizing, you go from the real to the stylized. Gord Miggy, thank you for the follow. You go from the real to the stylized, right? You take a human and you stylize that human and you end up with Overwatch characters, right? But if you are taking the stylized and you're going back, there are so many things that you omitted to stylize that when you take that thing back, you are missing a certain level of detail and functionality and I guess complexity to surfaces, the sort of greebles that you would use on those surfaces, texturing, the way that things are made, the construction of things, right? And therefore, what I feel like is the case is that when we go back to this guy, he is lacking a certain level of tertiary detail that I just explained, and he sort of feels very almost unfinished and basic because of this. Like, his proportions are a lot more normalized. The render style is more realistic and it has realistic textures, but there's really not a lot of detail in these surfaces to carry the render, and so it just feels a bit unfinished. And like same with this lady, it feels very like basic in that sense, and I think, and this is just my hunch, that it was designed as a much more stylized game, and then pivoted, and that's why that was the, when I looked at the game, that's what the feelings I got. It was like, it doesn't look finished. I think in terms of the gameplay, the level design that I saw, like I do like hero shooters and that kind of thing as a genre anyway. I was like, yeah, this looks fun. Like when I first saw the trailer, I was like, yeah, cool. Like, I'll give that a go. I don't really have any of the grievances that people have with like the characters themselves. It's just more looking at that really colorful thing and then going back to this, I was just like, oh shit. But yeah, it seems a little there's something going on there. I'd love to know if that hunch is correct. But yeah, it was only after I saw the concept art come out I was like, wait a minute. Wait a minute. I smell a rat. Theory time. Yeah, I'm always correct. Just remember that. Man, I'm gonna go home with a sore throat today. I feel like I've been preaching. So sorry if you came here for a relaxing time. Looks very plastic. Oh yes, I totally get what you mean now you say it. Yeah, I haven't been able to, and I haven't like really looked super hard, but I haven't been able to find like a lot more concept art to confirm my suspicions, but knowing how this stuff can go, it really could be a case of that. Because game development is messy. And just because something is a certain way for even a few years doesn't mean it's going to be the same way in the finished product. So but yeah, damn, we're very much almost at the end. But it's nice because I still feel like the draw to continue doing parts of this illustration. Like there's a lot to do still, especially when it comes to sort of tying it all together. Tying it all together with a bit more mood, a bit more sort of like extra detail in areas. But it's been really fun to work on so far, and yeah, quite enjoyed myself, and yeah, very much enjoyed the conversations today. Free therapy on a Wednesday. I think everyone got their money's worth. And yeah, loads of new followers and stuff today. So yeah, really cool. I have to thank you guys for making this an enjoyable thing for me as well. And yeah, hopefully it was engaging for you guys as well. Yeah, we are at the 4-hour mark, so I'm gonna wrap the stream up. If you're new here and you want to watch the beginning of the stream or yesterday's stream or anything, they are all on YouTube. Just follow the link. I mean, I can scroll up and grab it maybe. It's the pinned comment. There we go. But I'll repost it again. Watch the old VODs here. I did that wrong. There you go. Beautiful. Yes. So, there may or may not be a stream tomorrow. I will put a thing out on Instagram and in the various Discord servers if we're going ahead. I just need to go home and check what's going on. If there is a stream tomorrow, obviously we'll continue with this one. If not, I'll be back next week on Tuesday to stream some more on this image. And yeah, reach out if you got any questions for me and I'm not on stream. You reach out to me on Instagram or Discord or on the YouTube comments or wherever. But yeah, thank you very much for tuning in. I wish you all a wonderful day and a lovely evening as well. And hopefully, yeah, that's all good. All right. Well, peace out, and I will catch you next time. Toodles!